Hello and welcome to our presentation on fishery management. We'll be talking about the problems with today's fisheries and whether aquaculture is the solution.
The MSC, which stands for the Marine Stewardship Council, defines a fishery as a unit determined by an entity that is engaged in raising and/or harvesting fish. This can be specified by the people involved, species of fish, area, and so on.
Fish stocks are declining and therefore total catch is also decreasing. Just from 2015 to 2016, the total landings by UK vessels fell from 708,000 tonnes to 701,000 tonnes. A leading cause of these diminishing stocks is poor fishery management.
Overfishing is happening at an alarming rate. One cause of this is population increase, which is on the rise from 7.5 billion, thus resulting in a higher demand of fish such as tuna, cod and salmon. In 2016, the average person ate 44 pounds of fish each year, consuming twice as much than in the 1960s.
Advances in technology has led to improved nets, bigger boats, shown here as the second largest pelagic trawler in Scotland, and an increased fishing effort commercially and locally.
Not only this, electronic systems are being used to locate shoals of fish much more easily, and therefore this means the stocks have greater vulnerability. There are also net sounders on trawlers, which give information about the concentration of the surrounding fish, and catch sensors, which show how quickly the net is filling.
Once a fish stock has become exhausted, the chances of recovery are very slim. One example of this is the Atlantic cod, which have been harvested in Canadian waters since the 1500s. This population had its first key collapse in the 1960s after the weight of fish caught rose from 300,000 tonnes in the 1880s to 810,000 tonnes, forcing Canada to extend its fisheries jurisdiction to 200 nautical miles. However, the major collapse in the 1990s, where between 1.5 and 2.5 billion individual fish were caught, was the turning point that drove this species to near extinction.
A moratorium on direct-to-commercial fishing was announced in 1992, effective immediately, which caused around 40,000 people to lose their jobs overnight. Despite this, fishing of cod in the area still occurred during this period, although most of it was bycatch. The moratorium was lifted for inshore waters in 1998, but the ban for offshore water is still in place. Even though fishing of the North Atlantic Canadian cod has dramatically reduced, the population is still struggling to recover.
Quotas and other regulations set by the government are rarely and properly enforced, and this leads to unreported and unregistered catches by fishermen. An example of a government regulation is the UN Fish Stocks Agreement, which sets out to conserve and maintain fish stocks based on scientific information. Not only this, there is very little political pressure to lower harvest rates, as this reduces job opportunities and profits.
A local issue is that of the native oysters of Mersey Island. Mersey Island is situated in the Blackwater estuary 9 miles from Colchester. The oysters found here are very important to the local fishing industry, as these are sold both locally and shipped worldwide. These oysters were once present in waters spanning from Norway to the Mediterranean. However, due to overfishing, there are only a few beds of native oysters left. The FAO have shown that in the past 40 years the global production of native oysters has declined drastically, as less than 0.2% of oyster catch in 2002 were from this species. To prevent the collapse of this species, the Pacific oysters were introduced to UK oyster fisheries in the 1960s.
Research carried out by the Essex Wildlife Trust, collaborating with local oyster fishermen, proved that populations of Mersey Island were close to collapse. To protect the oysters and allow them to recover, a marine conservation zone was created, which covers the Blackwater, Crouch, Roach and Colne estuaries, a total of 284 square kilometres. This zone is managed and maintained to provide the best chance of success in the oyster's recovery.
The FAO, known as the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, defines aquaculture as the farming of aquatic animals and plants. Much like on land, conditions for the growth of the desired species can be controlled. This includes aspects such as food, disease and abiotic factors, which can be manipulated to best suit the species of fish being raised. This will increase the likelihood of producing top quality fish ready for sale. This mainly occurs on an industrial scale, with fish kept in tanks and cages in lakes, ponds and the ocean. Fish farming provides some solution to the depletion of wild fish stocks, however it does not come without its problems.
One main issue is that agriculture uses fish meal or ground up fish as feed. The species used for this fish meal are usually made up of small foraging fish including European sprat, sardines and anchovy. Despite the fact that these have less commercial value, many poor communities rely on these types of organisms as a key component of their diet, which in turn has a negative impact on food security. This is because it can be seen as depriving people of a cheap food source.
The process of making fish meal requires a highly mechanised system which grinds, dries and cooks the fish using a large amount of energy. It is not very sustainable. There is a higher input of fish than output, as raising 1 kilogram of average farm fish uses 1.9 kilograms of fish meal.
For carnivorous species such as salmon, 5 kilograms of fish meal produces 1 kilogram of fish. Consumption of this fish is 3 times higher than it was in the 1980s, and salmon aquaculture accounts for 70% of the market. Immature salmon is used in fish meal, and they are effectively eating the young of their own species. Other common farmed fish species include cod, trout, and mussels.
Disease is another main problem when it comes to aquaculture. Due to the lack of space and the fish being held in tight caged environments, this can spread very easily, especially through parasites and bacteria. To try and eradicate this, chemicals and antibiotics are administered either directly onto the organism, through its food, or added to the water. This can lead to concerns about antibiotic resistance in humans.
Chemical and other waste is a real concern. It can accumulate in the farmed fish and also spread into wild fish populations. Chemicals used to clean the tanks and disinfect can furthermore destroy the surrounding environment's flora, decimating habitats for local organisms and therefore reducing the population. Some of the chemicals known to have been used in this includes hydrogen peroxide and formaldehyde.
Predation on the farm fish occurs relatively frequently, including squid, seabirds and mammals. This activity can kill or injure the fish and damage the equipment and nets, but also spread disease and stress to the farm fish. Farm species can potentially escape and interbreed with wild populations. This alters and normally reduces the overall pool of genetic diversity.
Despite this, fish farming can be good for several reasons. It provides industrial scale quantities of fish. A total of 106 million tonnes were produced in 2015 alone, including both animals and plants.
It supplies affordable fish to the majority of the population, lower than if it was caught. Fish farms work alongside fisheries, often utilising stocks to raise juveniles on the farm or to use as fish meal. Therefore, it can create a vast range of large number of extra jobs, reducing unemployment.
Furthermore, the product produced is consistently of a high quality. This because the conditions that the fish are grown in are controlled and managed to maximise the health, quantity and size of these organisms. All the fish raised on farms will have very similar genetics, and this is due to selective breeding. This means that the most of the fish will be at the right standard, acceptable to be sold. This is because it will increase profits.
Moreover, there is very little chance of bycatch, apart from initially catching the juveniles, and this reduces the impact on the ecosystem.
Marine reserves are a type of marine protected area which puts a permanent restriction on activities which remove animals or plants, except for scientific monitoring. The Wildlife Trusts are calling for a network of marine protected areas in the UK, a blue belt, where all zones are connected together. This will help conserve species in these areas even further, as it allows migration and recovery of these organisms from past impacts.
Another option is the management of the age and length of fish caught. This means fishermen would only be allowed to land adult fish. This allows the population to reproduce once juveniles mature. However, accidentally catching these young fish could be a problem.
In Alaska, a 200-mile fishing limit is strictly enforced, which bans new boats from entering and controls the amount of time fishermen have to fill their quota. This quota has been suggested by scientists and is a lot lower than how much the fish population could withstand. This method has definitely helped preserve the wildlife here and should be implemented in other areas.
When purchasing seafood, make sure you know exactly where it comes from and how it was caught, whether buying at the supermarket or the fishmongers. Question the product. Is it really sustainable? The Marine Stewardship Council awards environmentally friendly fisheries blue eco labels, with more than 20,000 certified products on sale around the world. This makes it a lot easier for the public to identify good sources of sustainable seafood.
On the MCS website, there is also a list of certified sustainable seafood, which you can visit here.